They invited me to the wedding, but sat me with the kids and the waitstaff. No apology, not even a glance. I, the founder of an 80 million biometric AI company, was treated like I didn't exist by my own family. But I stayed quiet, because when I walked onto that stage, I didn't offer blessings. I cut off their financial lifeline with a contract I signed 3 hours earlier. And just like that, their wedding turned into a funeral for their reputation. Hit that subscribe button now to follow our next chapters where the forgotten stories are told with nothing but truth. The city stretched beneath her like a circuit board, cold, brilliant, and humming with purpose. Natalie Legrand stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her 37th floor office, arms crossed, a silent force against the blur of traffic steel and digital ads pulsing across the skyline. Behind her, the Nexus logo glowed softly on the wall, a ring of neural lines encircling a fingerprint. It was a symbol of everything she had built from nothing, a multi-million-dollar empire of artificial intelligence calibrated to the uniqueness of human biology. She was 41, unmarried, no children, and the founder and CEO of Nexus Technologies, valued last quarter at $80 million. And yet, according to her family, she was still Natalie the difficult. Her assistant had just left for the night. The office was quiet. Natalie sipped her black coffee, gone cold, staring at the rain beginning to streak the glass. Her reflection stared back, impossibly composed, tailored navy suit, not a hair out of place. But inside, the tension simmered. They'd never seen her, not really. Not the way investors did. Not the way the tech world did. Not even now, after she had rewritten the standards for biometric AI in 3 countries. To them, she was just the older daughter who didn't follow the script. It wasn't always like this. She leaned back against the window, letting memory pull her under. She was 10 the first time she realized she wasn't like her sister. While Lily twirled in her pink ballet tutu, earning applause from their parents for her grace, Natalie had been on the floor with a screwdriver pulling apart her father's broken radio, determined to fix it before dinner. "No girl wants a wrench for Christmas," her mother had said with a nervous laugh when Natalie unwrapped the tool set from her aunt. "But she asked for it," the aunt defended. "And look, she already rewired the remote." It didn't matter. By New Year's Eve, that same tool set had been quietly donated to a church charity. Natalie didn't complain. She'd learned early that silence was survival. Lily, 2 years younger, was everything Natalie wasn't: demure, agreeable, obedient. While Natalie debated adults at the dinner table and challenged teachers in class, Lily sat quietly coloring in princess books. Their mother bragged that Lily had perfect marriage potential. Natalie, not so much. Every summer, Lily went to etiquette camp while Natalie went to robotics boot camp, winning regional contests with machines that could sort marbles by color. No one came to the awards ceremonies, not once. By high school, the divide had turned into a chasm. Lily became prom queen. Natalie built an AI that could recognize facial emotions in 1.2 seconds. Lily's photo made the front page of the school newspaper. Natalie's invention got her an internship offer from Stanford's neurotech lab. Their mother framed Lily's photo. Natalie's acceptance letter was tucked in a kitchen drawer, never spoken of again. At 17, Natalie tried once more. Her father was in the garage polishing the classic Mustang he only drove on weekends. She handed him a thick folder, Nexus, the early blueprint, years ahead of its time. A vision of personalized medical care built on neural identifiers. "I need 10,000, she said, calm but hopeful. "Just seed money. I've done the math, written the model. This could be..." "You want to gamble real money on robots?" He cut her off, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Why not work with me at Legrand Hardware? That's a real business, not this fantasy." "It's not robots," she said quietly. "It's intelligence. Biology-based algorithms that..." "Sweetheart," he interrupted again with the patronizing tone that sliced deeper than any shout. "You'll grow out of this. One day you'll want something real. A family, stability." She didn't speak for the rest of the week. Years passed. She graduated valedictorian from MIT and launched Nexus from the second bedroom of a shared apartment in San Francisco. She didn't ask for help again. She ate instant noodles, slept 4 hours a night, read code until her eyes burned. She hired interns she paid with lunch, sold her car to keep the server running. No one from home called, except her Aunt Diana once every few months, just to say she was proud of her in a voice that sounded like apology. Then came the click. A major research hospital in Japan adopted Nexus's scanning algorithm to detect rare genetic anomalies in newborns. Results improved 37%. Funding flooded in. She opened her first office, then another. Her name started showing up on panels, on lists, on stages. And still, when she called home, her mother would ask, "So, are you seeing anyone yet?" That evening, in the silence of the office, Natalie scrolled through her email. She had 3 urgent client proposals to review, a CNN interview to prep for, and a call scheduled with Medisar's CTO in less than 24 hours. Medisar was a behemoth in healthcare conglomerates, and they were finally ready to consider licensing Nexus's full biometric monitoring suite, a deal that could push Nexus past the nine-figure valuation mark. The email in her inbox didn't have a subject line. It was from Lily. Natalie hovered over it, almost not clicking. But curiosity won. From Lily Legrand to Natalie Legrand, subject. Hi, Nat. I know it's been a while. I hope you're well. I wanted to tell you, I'm getting married. His name is Simon. You might know the company. He's the VP at Metasar. The wedding is in 4 weeks at the Glenmere estate. It would mean a lot if you came. Really. I know we haven't always connected, but this is important to me. Mom says she's already picked a table for you. Hope to see you. Lily. Natalie stared at the screen. VP at Metasar. Her brain froze. Was this a joke? Simon Ellis, the same man she was negotiating with the contract she'd been nurturing for the past 6 months? She checked her call calendar. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Simon Ellis Metasar Strategic Licensing. For a second, the years collapsed. She was back in their kitchen, Lily lying that Natalie had stolen her bracelet. Their mother yelling, Natalie holding her breath, Lily crying crocodile tears that everyone believed. Simon, Metasar, her family, all colliding in one exquisitely timed disaster. She closed the laptop, walked to the window again. The rain was heavier now, washing streaks down the glass like some divine effort to blur the city's edges. She could ignore it, skip the wedding, focus on the contract, play it like a CEO. Or she could go, stand in that room, face every ghost that had ever tried to tell her she was less than. Her phone buzzed. Another email from her lawyer. FYI, Metasar board meeting confirmed. Final contract sign-off to happen at Glenmere Estate. Looks like they've chosen to close the deal at the wedding weekend. Of course they had. She laughed, low bitter. This wasn't just about family anymore. It was business. And she'd never let either of them blindside her again. Natalie picked up her phone. Aaron, she said when he answered. Find me something elegant. Dark blue, powerful. I've got a wedding to attend. And just like that, she was in. At 28, Natalie Legrand was living in a converted warehouse in Oakland that smelled permanently of soldered wires, instant noodles, and burnt ambition. The ceilings leaked when it rained. The heater worked only when kicked. And the only furniture she'd invested in was a secondhand lab bench and a standing desk built from recycled server crates. But the whiteboard was full. Formulas, neural mapping sketches, and integration protocols scrawled across every inch in black and blue ink, punctuated by arrows and symbols that only she understood. Nexus Technologies hadn't even been legally incorporated yet, but Natalie had already spent every dime of her savings chasing an idea that had been haunting her since MIT. The world didn't need another app. It needed intelligence, the kind that wasn't just smart but aware, capable of adapting to human physiology, learning from it, evolving with it. She wasn't building software. She was building the future of personalized medical diagnostics AI that could detect, predict, and prevent illness by learning each person's unique biometric signature. It was revolutionary, and she was entirely alone. She'd applied for grants, rejected, pitched to investors, ignored, a few offered her jobs. Just join our team instead, this seems a bit ambitious for one person. She said no to all of them. Instead, she walked into a local bank and applied for a small business loan. The officer was polite but skeptical. AI in healthcare, he'd asked, flipping through her business plan. That's niche. It won't be in 5 years, she replied. He smiled in that way men do when they think you're smart but unrealistic. She got approved for $42,000, barely enough to cover the cost of her hardware-software licenses and an intern from Berkeley she could only afford to pay in boba and burrito bowls. So she moved into the warehouse, slept on a fold-out cot beside the 3D printer, ate ramen breakfast, lunch, and dinner, traded Wi-Fi access with the bakery next door for diagnostics on their POS system. She worked 18 hours a day, sometimes 20. She didn't tell her parents. What would she even say? Hey, Mom, Dad, your disappointment of a daughter has decided to gamble her future on an AI that speaks to skin conductivity and cortisol spikes. They wouldn't understand. They never had. The only one who might have was her cat, Caro, rescued from a freeway underpass during a rainstorm. Caro sat beside her every night, curled against the hum of machines, as if protecting something sacred. Then one night around 2 a.m., while debugging a particularly stubborn strain of predictive code, a memory surfaced. 16 years old. It had been the day after parent-teacher conferences. Her chemistry teacher had pulled her aside and said, "You could be at Caltech by 18 if you keep this up." She'd gone home glowing, barely able to contain her excitement. Lily had been waiting in the kitchen, eating strawberries with powdered sugar. When Natalie shared the news, Lily said nothing at first, just nodded. "Wow," she whispered. "That's really cool." That night, Natalie found Caro locked in the garage freezer. The cat had survived barely. And when Natalie confronted Lily, her younger sister had cried, sobbed, said she had no idea how it happened. That she must have accidentally shut the door. That she would never do something like that. Her parents believed her. Natalie never forgot. Not the tears, not the performance, not the way her father muttered, "You're too sensitive," when she pressed for answers. She learned that night that some things, even cruelty, could be dressed in innocence and sugar, and that no one would protect her but herself. Now at 28, sitting in that drafty warehouse debugging code while Caro dozed under a heat lamp, she felt that old familiar chill. Not just from the memory, but from the pressure closing in. The demo was tomorrow. After 18 months of sleepless work, they were finally presenting the first real-time live biometric scan using her AI neural layer, Neuronet 3. The potential client, a mid-sized diagnostic lab based in Arizona. If it worked, she'd get funding. If it didn't, well, there were no backup plans. The next day, she wore her only tailored blazer, straightened her hair, and walked into the lab like she'd already made it. The test subjects had been prepped. The scans initiated, the data began to stream. Then latency. A delay, then another, then silence. The screen froze. One of the doctors coughed awkwardly. Another checked their watch. The system had stalled, a memory overflow, a security loop nested where it shouldn't have been. Her intern's eyes widened in horror. Natalie calmly rebooted, recalibrated. Too late. They thanked her for her time and showed her the door. That night she cried for the first time in months, not because of the failure but because she couldn't afford a second one. Her bank account was down to 3 digits. Her server costs were due in 4 days. Her intern quit the next morning, apologizing with a Starbucks gift card taped to a sticky note. She didn't blame him. She was losing grip, fast. 3 days later, she got a cold email. Subject, your Nexus paper at Tech Biocon. Someone had seen the conference notes she posted after being rejected from the panel. A mid-level researcher from a Japanese biomedical institute specializing in neonatal gene therapy. They wanted to know more about her adaptive biometric loop theory. Natalie replied immediately, then waited. 2 weeks later, a Zoom meeting was scheduled. 4 weeks after that, she was on a plane to Tokyo, carrying a prototype in a recycled hardshell case and praying that TSA wouldn't mistake it for something illegal. The meeting was at Hoshino Institute of Medical Research, sterile minimalist but pulsing with quiet genius. The presentation was short. Her Japanese was rusty, but the software spoke fluently. The scan ran smoothly. The infant patient was monitored in real time for genetic markers and enzyme anomalies, with Natalie's AI adapting with precision. No latency, no crashes. At the end of the session, the lead researcher turned to his team and said 2 words in English. This works. That moment changed everything. The institute offered a 6-month partnership data exchange, partial funding, and access to their biometric data cloud for further learning algorithms. Natalie signed the papers with a hand that barely stopped shaking. Back in her warehouse, she reinstalled everything, upgraded, hired again, smarter this time, pulled long nights but with purpose. She brought on a CTO, registered Nexus officially, filed patents. Then the calls started. Stanford, Tel Aviv, Montreal. One small yes had broken the silence of 100 no's. She didn't tell her parents, not yet. But one evening, she emailed her Aunt Diana with a photo of her standing beside the Japanese research team holding the signed agreement. Subject, thought you'd like to see this. The reply came 2 hours later. I always knew. Love, Diana. It was 2 a.m. again. The warehouse was warm this time. Caro purred from her pillow. The machines hummed alive with possibility. Natalie sat cross-legged on the floor, drinking tea, staring at a model of the human body outlined in projected light, every organ pulsing, every line of code behind it humming with electricity. She wasn't the quiet girl with a toolbox anymore. She wasn't the sister who had to shrink herself so someone else could shine. She was the architect of a future no one in her family could even spell. And for the first time, that truth didn't ache, it sang. 14 floors above the chaos of San Francisco's financial district, Natalie Legrand sat beneath a backlit 30 under 30 revisited plaque on the wall, her profile framed beside an oversized Forbes magazine cover. She was calm in the way ice appears still before it cracks. The headline read, Natalie Legrand, the code that knows you better than your doctor. Below it, the subheading, founder of Nexus AI ADM Valuation and Rising. That morning, she'd been on CNBC. The day before that, she'd given a TED Talk on ethical AI and personalized medicine. Last week, Nexus Technologies had secured a grant from the NIH to pilot AI-driven neuroscans in pediatric patients. But that afternoon, her mother had called to remind her not to wear black to Lily's wedding. Not congratulations, not pride. Just please don't ruin your sister's big day with that CEO wardrobe of yours. Natalie stared at her reflection in the darkened screen of her monitor, backlit by accolades that couldn't seem to pierce the blind spots of blood ties. 16 minutes into the call, Natalie still hadn't said a word beyond hi. Her mother had gone on about flower arrangements the size of the cake, the guests that can't wait to meet Lily's new family, and how Natalie should consider not mentioning work just for once, sweetie. Not everyone's into algorithms. Natalie finally spoke. Mom, I'm on the cover of Forbes this month. A pause. Then a laugh that wasn't quite warm. Well, that's nice. I hope they used a flattering photo. Natalie didn't answer. She had once begged for acknowledgement. Now she simply observed its absence. Her mother continued, It's just, Lily's wedding is a huge deal for us. The Bradfords are a very traditional family. They appreciate subtlety, elegance. I'm not planning to show up in a lab coat, Natalie said dryly. I know, sweetheart, but maybe try a pastel soft blue or something floral. You know, like a woman. Just don't wear black. That's for funerals. The irony bit so hard she could taste blood. Later that evening, Natalie stood before a two-way mirror at Nexus headquarters. On the other side, a team of young engineers presented the latest update of their AI interface to a delegation from the European Union. They were excited, wide-eyed, hungry, every one of them under 30, each one reverent when she entered the room, almost intimidated. They had no idea she still woke up some mornings wondering if her own family would ever speak her name with half that awe. The demo ended in applause. As the EU delegation left, several executives shook her hand and spoke of changing the world and setting new global standards. Natalie nodded, professional polished. But when the doors closed and the team dispersed into happy chatter, she stayed behind. Alone in the dark observation room, the echo of her heels against the tile was the only applause she heard now. On a nearby monitor, someone had pulled up the video of her CNBC interview. It played on mute. She watched herself smile, answer questions with poise and wit. The caption read, Natalie Legrand, 41, CEO of Nexus AI, the future of preventive medicine is personal. She turned away. Her father once told her that women who built things didn't last. They burn out, he'd said while buttering his toast as if discussing the weather. You'll see. That was before she raised her first million, before the Institute of Genetic Medicine named her a global innovator, before Forbes, before Nexus hit 80 million on. But he hadn't updated his opinion. The last time they'd spoken, he'd asked if she'd ever considered freezing her eggs. You know, he'd added awkwardly, just in case the business thing doesn't work out forever. It wasn't even cruelty, she realized. It was blindness. A refusal to believe she could rewrite the script and still be valid, still be woman enough, still be lovable. And Lily Goldenchild Lily fit the mold so perfectly she was now marrying into a dynasty. 2 weeks before the wedding, Natalie had received an internal report confirming that Medisar, the company her sister's fiancé worked for, was finalizing due diligence on licensing her AI framework. If approved, it would become the largest contract Nexus had ever signed. She stared at the chart, Medisar board greenlight pending. CEO signature scheduled. Technical trials passed. Timeline concurrent with the wedding, which meant the contract wouldn't be announced at a boardroom table. It would be inked in champagne and canapes. She would walk into that room as a guest while everyone whispered about Simon and Lily, the new Bradfords. No one would mention that the technology driving the deal was built by the woman at table 12, or 42, or whatever seat they would shove her into out of sight. Natalie knew how these things worked. She'd been pushed to the periphery all her life. Even now, with her name echoing in tech journals across 4 continents, her family still spoke of her as if she were the other one. And yet something in her had shifted. She no longer needed their validation. But that didn't mean she'd accept their erasure. That night, the office hosted a surprise celebration. Her assistant Sarah had organized it champagne cupcakes balloons printed with ADM Club. The team clapped and toasted and took selfies with her. She gave a brief, gracious speech, smiled for photos. But 20 minutes in, she slipped away, found the rooftop, alone. She sat on the edge legs, dangling a glass of champagne untouched beside her. Below, the city buzzed. Drones blinked red against the night. The wind pulled at her hair. She scrolled through her texts. There were dozens of congratulatory messages. Not one from her mother, not one from her father. And Lily? She'd sent a forwarded TikTok trend about AI boyfriends replacing real men. Natalie didn't reply. She'd always thought that success would fill the cracks, that once she made it, once she was undeniably somebody, the missing pieces would click into place. Her mother would beam. Her father would stop looking at her like a malfunctioning robot. Her sister would see her not as a threat, but as an equal. But the applause that mattered most had never come. And now, as Nexus soared, as journalists called her the oracle of biosentience, Natalie realized something she hadn't dared before. Their silence wasn't her burden. It was their limit. She stood, walked to the glass railing, took a sip of the champagne, then poured the rest out into the air, letting it glitter for a moment like liquid gold before disappearing into the city below. Tomorrow she'd pick the dress for the wedding. Pastel, probably not. Floral, never. Black, maybe. Because black wasn't for funerals. It was for power, for boundaries. For women who didn't ask to be seated, they built their own tables. And sometimes they brought the contracts that decided the fate of dynasties. She smiled, small, sharp, and walked back inside. The estate looked like something plucked from a wedding magazine printed exclusively for royalty. Gold-trimmed hedges, champagne fountains, white orchids dangling from archways strung with imported silk. Even the gravel in the driveway seemed curated, crushed ivory marble that sparkled under the June sun. A drone camera hummed overhead, capturing sweeping shots from the wrought iron gates to the grand staircase at the heart of the Glenmere estate. Videographers circled like hawks in black polos, marking angles, measuring light. This wasn't a wedding. It was a brand launch. Subtle, Aaron murmured as their Tesla eased up the drive. He was in a charcoal tux, his dark hair perfectly combed, fingers casually drumming the armrest. He glanced at Natalie with a half smile. "You sure you want to do this?" Natalie adjusted the cuffs of her suit. Midnight blue silk line sharply tailored. Not a dress, not a pastel. She wore it like armor. "No," she said simply. "But I'm not here to support the marriage. I'm here to witness the merger." Aaron gave a soft, approving laugh. "Then let's go crash the IPO." They stepped out of the car to a valet who looked barely 20 and probably couldn't afford the parking space they'd just vacated, let alone the vehicle. He smiled nervously, took the keys with a bow, and scurried off. Natalie took in the crowd, stylists fussing over bouquets, women in gowns worth small fortunes, old men in seersucker suits, their watches catching the light like status beacons. A soft jazz quartet played near a rose-drenched fountain. She wasn't nervous, she was aware. Every detail mattered. Every glance, every whispered conversation held meaning. The photographer turned camera raised instinctively when he spotted her, and then paused, confused, hesitant. Not quite sure whether she was important or just familiar. Natalie met his eyes, unblinking. He lowered the camera. Exactly. Inside the estate's grand foyer, crystal chandeliers refracted afternoon sunlight across polished marble. The air smelled like money roses, bergamot, and quiet entitlement. A woman with a headset and a clipboard flitted over, mistaking Aaron for the guest of interest. "Name, please." "Natalie Legrand, +1. The woman glanced at the list, blinked. "Ah, yes, of course, follow me." They were led into a reception lounge swarming with voices and expensive shoes. Natalie immediately recognized several executives from Medisar's advisory board. They didn't recognize her. Not yet. She spotted her parents across the room, her mother Judith in a soft lilac dress that likely cost more than Natalie's entire wardrobe. Her father Robert stood near the bar, bourbon in hand, chatting with a man whose laugh sounded like wealth inherited, not earned. Judith saw her first. A pause. Then a practiced smile, polite, distant, a social obligation dressed up in motherly warmth. "Natalie," she said, approaching, a single air kiss on the cheek. "You came." "You invited me," Natalie replied dry. Judith ignored the tone, her eyes shifted to Aaron. "And who is this?" Aaron stepped forward, hand out. "Aaron Wu, Natalie's strategic advisor." Natalie cut in smoothly. "Pleasure," Judith replied without shaking his hand. She turned back to Natalie. "Just a small request, sweetheart. Let's not bring up work today, okay? This day is for Lily." Before Natalie could respond, Robert appeared. His eyes ran over her like an X-ray. Not warm, not hostile, just clinical. "Don't talk business," he said preemptively, "especially not with Simon's people. Timing is sensitive." "You mean the timing of the contract Nexus is finalizing with Medisar?" Natalie said, voice like a scalpel. Robert blinked. Judith's smile twitched. "Still," he said finally, "don't make things complicated." They were escorted into the garden area where a massive white canopy had been erected over rows of tables draped in ivory cloth set with fine china and gold flatware. Each table had a calligraphed sign, "Family Close Friends, Medisar Partners Bridal Party." Natalie scanned for her name. There it was, small, elegant script. "Table 42. She followed the signage. Past the rose arches, past the champagne tower, all the way to the back. It was tucked near the hedge bordering the estate grounds, just far enough from the music to be barely audible, just close enough to the catering entrance to catch wafts of warm trays and shouted kitchen orders. A single round table. Already seated, 2 toddlers in tiny suits banging spoons on plates, a distant cousin Natalie barely recognized, and a pair of catering staff on break chatting in hushed tones in Spanish. Aaron looked at her, then at the sign. "Table 42, he said under his breath. Natalie stood still. No emotion on her face, no outburst, just stillness. Then a low, bitter breath, almost a laugh. No one had said it, but it was clear. She'd been placed with the expendables, the invisible, the staff and the children, the people who wouldn't disrupt the aesthetic of Table 1. There was no explanation, no apology, just placement. Judith's voice echoed in her head. "Let's not bring up work today, okay?" Because work meant relevance. And relevance would have disrupted the illusion that Lily was the crown jewel of the family. Aaron reached for her elbow. "We can leave right now." She didn't move. "I'm fine," she said. He stared. "Are you?" Natalie nodded once. "I just want to see what happens when people think they've buried you." She sat down, smiled at the toddler, then unfolded her napkin with surgical precision. For the next 15 minutes, she sat, observed. Every Medisar executive walked past without looking. Her own uncle waved without approaching. Judith passed by, heading toward the bridal suite, avoiding her gaze. Lily never came by. Aaron stood, offered to get drinks, probably just needing space from the insult masquerading as seating. Natalie remained. Table 42. Like a bad joke with a seven-figure punchline. Her phone buzzed in her bag. A text from her assistant. Metasar deal will be formally announced at reception. Simon and board already toasting it inside. Press release scheduled for tomorrow. Her stomach twisted, but not from pain. From clarity. She wasn't seated in the back because they forgot. She was placed there because remembering her would have made them question the script. Lily's wedding was a pageant, a story curated for optics, and in that version, Natalie couldn't exist, not as a founder, not as a leader, not as anything but the inconvenient, unmarried sister who talked too much about things no one understood. The spoon in her hand bent slightly under her grip. She didn't flinch. She simply let it go, placed it neatly beside the plate. Aaron returned with champagne, set it down, looked at her carefully. What now? She looked out across the lawn. The Bradfords were arriving. Media was being prepped. Lily stood near the floral arch, camera ready. Natalie stood. Now, she said. She smoothed her suit. Now we remind them whose technology they just bet their entire infrastructure on. And without waiting for acknowledgement, she turned, leaving the edge of the estate behind. Leaving table 42. And walking toward the center where the story they wrote without her was about to change. Natalie sat at table 42 with her hands folded perfectly in her lap, each finger aligned with the precision of someone who refused to let herself unravel, at least not visibly. The lace napkin lay untouched, the champagne Aaron had brought still full. Her breathing was steady, practiced. But inside, something sharp was pressing against her ribs. Aaron leaned slightly toward her, his voice low and carefully measured. We don't have to stay, Nat. I mean it. We can walk out right now, go get oysters, laugh at this whole circus. She didn't answer. Because just then, a young catering assistant approached, barely 20, flushed from kitchen heat, balancing a silver tray of flutes. She hesitated at Natalie's side, then leaned in, voice quiet, almost conspiratorial. They told us you weren't to be seated up front, the girl said. Said you weren't part of the VIP grouping. Natalie turned. Who told you that? The girl's eyes widened. The coordinator and the bride's mom. There it was. Not a mistake, not a glitch in the system. A directive. The girl, clearly regretting saying anything, offered a shy smile and disappeared into the growing crowd. Natalie sat back, the weight of that phrase pressing down. You're not part of the VIP grouping. Aaron let out a soft exhale beside her. This is insane. You're the one with the IP. The deal doesn't exist without you. She stared out across the immaculate lawn at the string quartet, the choreographed servers, the media crew setting up for the reception livestream. The guests buzzed like insects around sugar. Everything manicured, seamless, staged. And still the script had no room for her. Not in the spotlight, not even at the proper table. She stood, suddenly straightened her shoulders. Walk with me, she said. They left table 42 behind, letting the clink of cutlery and murmurs fall away. The garden wrapped around the back of the estate, quieter, less decorated except for the ancient oaks that offered shade and shadows, and the stone paths flanked by marble angels. They walked slowly. She didn't speak. Aaron kept glancing at her, then away. He knew better than to force conversation. After several minutes, Natalie finally stopped near a bench and looked out at the trees. Do you remember your first memory of being excluded? She asked, eyes not leaving the horizon. Aaron blinked, probably being picked last for dodgeball in 4th grade. She gave a ghost of a laugh. Mine was my cousin's 6th birthday party. All the girls were given pink plastic tiaras and glitter wands. They handed me a dinosaur toy because I had short hair and liked robots. You do like robots. I was 5, she said flatly. I liked feeling seen. She sat on the bench. There's this myth in families, she continued, that blood means belonging, that no matter what, you always have a place. But sometimes your own blood treats you like a parasite. Aaron sat beside her in silence. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, voice steady but low. At every family reunion, they called me the glitch, like it was a joke. Where's the little glitch, probably hacking the microwave again? They'd say it at the dinner table, in front of everyone. Did your parents say anything? She turned to him. They laughed. They sat in silence, the weight of history filling the space between them. Then Natalie stood. I'm not leaving. Aaron rose with her, I figured. They have to see me, she said. Not as an error, not as background noise. They have to know exactly who they tried to edit out. Aaron nodded slowly. Then let's make sure they remember. As they walked back toward the estate, they paused behind a trellis of ivy. Voices drifted from the other side, clear, animated, and unmistakably familiar. It was Simon, the groom, her sister's fiancé, and Robert Legrand, her father. They were standing in the side lounge just out of view of the main crowd sharing drinks. I don't care what Eleanor says, Simon was saying. Once the licensing deal's inked, we shift to internal development. No need to stay tied to her platform. Natalie froze. Robert chuckled. Smart. Get what you need from the tech, then cut the string before she starts asking for equity stakes. She thinks she's irreplaceable, Simon added. But it's just a software package. We replicate the framework, build a separate shell. No one at the board level's married to her involvement. A pause. Ice clinked in their glasses. Then Robert's voice again. Just be discreet. We let the ink dry, give it a quarter or two, then phase her out. The board will follow if you frame it as financial autonomy. Simon laughed. You think Lily's gonna care? Robert gave a low grunt. Lily thinks it's about flowers and dresses. This, he tapped his glass against Simon's, is what builds empires. Natalie didn't breathe. She couldn't. She stood behind the ivy spine, rigid mouth, dry eyes burning not from shock, but from recognition. This wasn't betrayal. It was continuity. The same pattern refined over time, minimize her, use her, then discard her once the benefit ran out. She didn't need to hear more. She turned, walking away fast, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Aaron followed, silent, not daring to ask. It wasn't anger flooding her veins. It was clarity. Cold, clean, unforgiving. She wasn't at the edge of the story anymore. She was about to flip the page and write herself into the center, where she belonged, where they never thought she'd dare to stand. The champagne was flowing. Music swelled like a slow crescendo in the lavishly draped reception tent. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above silk-draped tables. Guests dressed in gowns and tailored suits buzzed with anticipation. The reception was in full swing, every moment choreographed with Pinterest-level precision. It was time for the toasts. The master of ceremonies, an overly enthusiastic event planner with a glittering mic and plastic enthusiasm, stepped forward and tapped the glass. Ladies and gentlemen, he beamed as tradition goes, we now welcome someone very special to say a few words for the bride and groom. The sister of the bride, Miss Natalie Legrand. A polite smattering of applause, a few confused glances. Some raised eyebrows from Medisar executives who hadn't realized there even was a sister. Somewhere near the front, Lily visibly tensed hand clutching her new husband's arm. Natalie stood slowly from table 42. The walk to the stage was long, not physically but psychologically. Every eye turned, every flashbulb paused. The woman in midnight blue, structured, composed, was not who they expected. She ascended the stage without a smile. No note cards, no wine glass. Just the mic. And a voice honed not in weddings but in boardrooms. Good evening, she said, looking out at the sea of stunned faces. I know I wasn't on the original program, but I'm told this is the part where family members give their blessings. A polite chuckle rolled across the room, uncertain more reflex than amusement. Natalie let it pass. My name is Natalie Legrand. I'm the older sister of the bride. But more than that, I'm the founder and CEO of Nexus Technologies. A murmur rippled. Some guests leaned in, others stiffened. I recognize many of you, she continued, scanning the tables. Executives from Medisar, venture partners, investors, colleagues. She paused. And I'm sure many of you are aware of the ongoing negotiations between Medisar and my company regarding a licensing deal for our proprietary biometric AI system. Now the air grew still. Over the past few months, we've been in deep conversation, technical evaluations, compliance assessments, draft contracts, all leading toward what was projected to be a landmark partnership. Natalie's voice didn't waver, her pulse didn't betray her. But negotiations have recently taken a turn. She glanced at the tech booth near the side of the tent, a subtle nod. The LED wall behind her lit up bright and bold. The logo of Johnson AI Labs appeared, followed by a simple, brutal message. Medisar has been formally excluded from the Global AI Healthcare Alliance, effective immediately. Gasps. Chairs scraped back. Someone dropped a glass. Natalie turned back into the crowd. Her eyes were steady. For those unfamiliar, Johnson AI Labs is the largest competitor to Medisar in the field of diagnostic artificial intelligence. As of yesterday, Nexus Technologies has entered an exclusive strategic agreement with Johnson. As part of that partnership, all current and prospective Medisar contracts have been revoked. Dead silence. Then whispers, fast, frantic, confused. Natalie held the room like a conductor, letting the silence build tension. I'm aware this may come as a surprise, especially here, especially today. But business like family is built on trust. And when that trust is violated, when you find yourself seated at the children's table at your own sister's wedding, or when corporate partners plot to extract and discard your life's work, clarity arrives. Her gaze swept toward the front. Lily's face was ghost pale. Her mascara had begun to smear. Simon sat frozen, jaw clenched. Robert Legrand, their father, looked like someone had slammed the brakes on his entire bloodline. I was placed at table 42. Natalie continued, softer now, with the children and the staff, while the people who depend on my technology toasted to my exclusion. She glanced once more at the screen. The message had updated. Johnson and Nexus, future of global diagnostic AI, Medisar delisted. And then she did the most shocking thing of all. She smiled. I won't take more of your time. You have a reception to enjoy. She placed the microphone gently on the podium, turned, and walked off the stage. No dramatic exit, no tears. Just silence in her wake and the sound of a family's story fracturing in real time. She moved through the rows of tables like a ghost, visible, untouchable. Guests stared. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered into their wine glasses. The Medisar board members huddled, already pulling out their phones, sending texts, scanning contracts. She passed the table where Simon and Lily sat, he with a face like concrete, she with trembling hands gripping the edge of her seat. Neither said a word. Judith Legrand tried to rise from her seat, but Natalie didn't even glance her way. Aaron was waiting by the exit. He didn't ask questions, just opened the door. The last thing Natalie heard before stepping into the cool evening air was the sound of someone sobbing. It wasn't grief. It was exposure. She descended the marble steps in silence. Aaron walked beside her. "You didn't burn the bridge," he said. Natalie looked at him, the glow from the estate behind her. "No," she replied. "I turned it into a spotlight." And then she kept walking away from the tent, the chandeliers, the curated image of a family that had tried to write her out. Toward something real, toward herself. The morning after the wedding, the world woke up differently, at least the part of it that spoke in stock tickers and investor dashboards. Medisar opened 18% down on the Nasdaq. By 10:07 a.m., trading was briefly halted due to irregular volatility. News outlets scrambled to verify what had happened at the Glenmere estate the previous evening. By noon, clips of Natalie Legrand's impromptu speech were circulating on financial Twitter venture capital subreddits and in WhatsApp groups of biotech investors from London to Seoul. The press called it the Table 42 bombshell. By 3:00 p.m., the headlines were unmissable. Nexus Technologies severs Medisar ties Johnson AI Labs, takes lead in global health tech war. Wedding speech or market sabotage, Natalie Legrand just redefined corporate warfare. The woman they put with the children just torpedoed a billion-dollar deal. Meanwhile, in Medisar's downtown Manhattan headquarters, fire alarms might as well have been blaring. Emergency board meetings, legal counsel on speakerphones, marketing teams desperately crafting statements that wouldn't spark an SEC inquiry. 'Cause there was more. Robert Legrand, board advisor to the Medisar partnership and patriarch of the family whose image was carefully curated at every public gala, was served a subpoena by the Securities and Exchange Commission less than 24 hours after Natalie's speech. The allegation: insider leverage and misrepresentation of corporate prospects during investor roundtables. A whistleblower, anonymous but later confirmed to be a junior analyst from Medisar's strategy department, sent screenshots of internal emails that showed Robert and Simon pre-selling the value of the Nexus deal to private investors before any contracts were signed. Worse, those communications directly contradicted the internal due diligence documents which outlined Medisar's intent to phase out the Nexus platform after gaining access to its proprietary data structure. Fraud by omission, wire fraud, market manipulation. By Thursday morning, Robert Legrand was escorted into a private hearing room on Capitol Hill wearing a navy suit and a face carved from embarrassment. Outside, cameras swarmed. Inside, the room was cold and clinical. No floral centerpieces here. Lily Legrand didn't appear in public for 3 days. When she finally did at a charity brunch scheduled weeks prior for the Global Women in Medicine initiative, her appearance was met with silence. The event had planned to announce her formal appointment to the board of the Legrand Medisar Health Trust, a philanthropic partnership aimed at deploying biometric screening tools in low-income clinics worldwide. That appointment was revoked. Officially, the reason cited was ongoing restructuring in light of recent events. Unofficially, it was bloodshed. Several donors pulled out the moment the Johnson AI Labs exclusivity deal was confirmed. No one wanted their image tied to Medisar in the midst of a public implosion. And Lily, once seen as a rising figure in social entrepreneurship, was now being whispered about as someone who benefited from nepotism and strategic deception. Her wedding was a press stunt, one anonymous donor was quoted in The Atlantic. She used her sister's tech to position herself as a visionary. But when that sister refused to be silent, the whole charade collapsed. Photos of Lily crying at the wedding circulated alongside headlines. Sympathy ran dry fast. But it wasn't just Medisar that had changed. It was Natalie. On Friday morning, a feature piece landed on the front page of the New York Times business section. The headline was elegant in its precision. From Table 42 to the vanguard of global health, how Natalie Legrand redefined power. The article was written by Amelia Reyes, a Pulitzer-nominated journalist who'd once profiled Elizabeth Holmes in the early days of Theranos. This time the story was different. Reyes chronicled Natalie's journey from a misunderstood girl nicknamed Glitch to the architect of the AI framework that had, in Reyes's words, the potential to redefine preventative healthcare across 3 continents. The piece didn't mention the wedding until paragraph 12, but when it did, it was surgical. Relegated to a table near the catering station, Ms. Legrand did not raise her voice. She raised the stakes. In one calculated move, she shifted not just the tone of a celebration, but the trajectory of an entire market. Screenshots of that paragraph flooded LinkedIn. Investors who once doubted Natalie sent private emails requesting meetings. Women in STEM used the hashtag Table42 to share their own stories of being silenced, sidelined, underestimated. Within hours, Johnson AI Labs value jumped 7.4% on the Tokyo Exchange. Nexus Technologies' website crashed from traffic twice. Natalie's office received 143 new partnership requests in 48 hours, most of them from companies that had never returned her calls just 6 months earlier. Back in her high-rise office, Natalie sat by the glass wall overlooking the skyline. She wasn't smiling. Not yet. Victory hadn't tasted like champagne or vindication. It tasted like clarity, like knowing she had built something that couldn't be uninvited, hidden, or denied. Aaron entered with 2 coffees and handed her one. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. On her desk was a hand-addressed envelope from the Dean of Engineering at MIT. Inside, an invitation to deliver the keynote address for the Fall Innovation and Ethics in Technology Summit. Aaron raised his coffee and a mock toast. To table 42, he said. Natalie touched her cup to his. May no one ever seat us there again. Across the city, in a quiet apartment with blackout curtains drawn, Lily sat in her designer robe scrolling through the article for the 10th time. The glowing praise, the triumphant photos, the public sympathy, and worst of all, the comments. Queen behavior. Her silence was her setup. Table 42, never again. She put her phone down and stared at the ceiling. In the battle for legacy, she'd lost the war she never even knew she was in, because she hadn't counted on the girl with the short hair and the dinosaur toy becoming the woman who'd own the whole museum. The call came at 7:12 a.m., not a minute earlier, not a second later. Natalie had just stepped onto her balcony, a mug of black coffee in hand, the early sun glinting off the skyline. She saw the name flash on her screen. Mom? No emoji, no pleasantries, just that word like it still had weight. She let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Her mother's voice hit without hesitation, clipped, trembling with barely contained rage. Did you enjoy it? Natalie blinked. Enjoy what? Making a spectacle, embarrassing your sister, humiliating your father. Hui kadan dunane chivi kai gengwe. Natalie said nothing for a beat. Then you think it was about a chair. You turned a wedding into a press release. No, Natalie said calmly. You turned your daughter into an afterthought. Again, I simply declined to stay there. You could have said something in private. I tried that for 30 years. Silence. What do you want from us, Natalie? She looked out at the city. Nothing. That's the point. Then why? I wanted you to see what it looks like when someone refuses to shrink to fit your comfort. She ended the call. The confrontation with Lily didn't happen immediately. It brewed in the silence of social media, in the phone calls Lily didn't return, in the carefully crafted apology posts that never quite addressed anything real. But then came the knock. Natalie's apartment, mid-afternoon, no warning. Aaron opened the door, then stepped aside silently. Lily stood in the hallway, no makeup, oversized coat, sunglasses she didn't remove. Natalie didn't offer a hug. Come in, she said, voice neutral. They sat in the kitchen, neither touching the tea Aaron placed between them. Lily broke first. You really hate me that much. Natalie looked at her. I don't hate you. Then why do I feel like the villain in your story? Because you played the part. Lily flinched. I didn't choose to be the favorite. Natalie nodded slowly. But you benefited from it. Every time I was overlooked, dismissed, told to quiet down, you smiled and said thank you. Because I didn't know how to fight it. You always did. Natalie narrowed her eyes. That's not strength, Lily. That's survival. I was surviving. You were thriving. Lily's voice cracked. I was compensating. For what? Lily looked away. When she spoke, it was barely audible. For not being you. Natalie didn't move. You didn't need anyone. You built things. People respected you. I wore the dresses, played the game, and all it got me was a title I couldn't defend. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I put your cat in this freezer because I hated how much they loved you for doing nothing. You got praise for existing. I had to beg for every ounce of attention. Natalie's voice was steady. You think I did nothing. I know better now, Lily whispered. I know you bled for what you built. But back then, I just wanted someone to see me too. Natalie stared at her sister, the woman in front of her, finally stripped of ceremony of envy, of the invisible crown she'd been trained to protect. And for the first time, she saw a mirror instead of a rival. You know what I wanted, Natalie said, to sit beside you, just once, as an equal. Not as the freak, not as the ghost of what our family wished I wasn't. Lily wiped her face. I'm sorry for all of it. Natalie didn't reply, but she reached for the tea, poured a cup, placed it in front of her sister. An invitation. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something real. 2 days later, the receptionist at Nexus buzzed her unexpectedly. Your father's here, the voice said. He's requesting 10 minutes. Natalie paused. Put him in the conference room. He was waiting when she entered. Robert Legrand, a man whose empire was burning at the edges. He didn't rise to greet her, just sat there, tie slightly loosened, the illusion of control fraying. She stood at the head of the table. What do you want? He gestured around. All of this, you built it without us. That was the only way it was going to exist. He nodded slowly. You made the world sit up and look. Natalie didn't respond. I spent decades trying to mold you into something I recognized, something safe. But all I did was miss who you really were. And what was that? His voice cracked for the first time, the only one in this family brave enough to tell the truth out loud. A beat. I should have sat next to you, he added, at the wedding. Not just for optics, for what it meant. She said nothing. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table. What's this? My resignation from the advisory board at Medisar. I've signed it. No more games, no more partnerships. I'll step back. Why? He looked up. Because it's time I let the right Legrand lead the future. She stared at him, not as a daughter, but as a woman who had earned every inch of her space. Leave the papers with legal, she said, then turned and walked out. Not coldly, not cruelly, just finally in full command of the room. The stage was nothing like the one at her sister's wedding. No chandeliers, no gold-trimmed drapes, just clean white light, a modest podium, and a backdrop that read Global Innovation Forum, Geneva 2025. Natalie adjusted the lapel of her navy blazer, the nexus pin gleaming just below her collarbone. The moderator spoke first, introducing her to the packed hall of entrepreneurs, scientists, and investors. The applause was genuine, the kind that didn't come from politeness but recognition. And now please welcome our final jury member, founder of Nexus Technologies and architect of the AI Health Shift platform, Ms. Natalie Legrand. She walked out with quiet confidence. The audience stood. Some had flown across oceans just to see her in person, just to understand how someone went from the margins of her own family to reshaping medical diagnostics worldwide. Natalie stood behind the mic, surveyed the room, and opened with a smile. You can build an empire on code, she began, but if it's not grounded in something human, it's just noise. A pause. I'm here to listen, to learn, and to make sure the next Natalie, wherever she's sitting, isn't placed at the kids' table. The crowd erupted. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not digital, not through a scheduler. A handwritten note embossed with the emblem of the U.S. Department of Health. It was from the National Cancer Prevention Fund. They had reviewed her recent clinical pilots using AI-driven blood biometrics to detect early signs of aggressive tumors in asymptomatic patients. The results were promising, too promising to ignore. The letter contained two things. One, a formal offer of a $28 million research grant to scale the platform nationwide. Two, a personal invitation to co-lead the Congressional Advisory Panel on AI Diagnostics. Natalie read it twice, then once more. She didn't smile, but she nodded slowly with the solemn recognition of what this meant. Her company, once funded by ramen and insomnia, now held a role in national health policy. In the silence of her office, she opened her drawer, pulled out the photo of her and her cat from her 20s, and whispered, "We made it." But she wasn't done. Because Natalie knew that for every woman like her who made it, 1,000 others still sat in the shadows, unheard and unseen. So she launched something new. A scholarship. She called it the Table 42 Initiative. The press release hit the wires on a rainy Tuesday morning. Nexus Technologies, in partnership with the Legrand Foundation, announces the launch of a global education fund for underrepresented girls in science and engineering. The program, named Table 42, honors those who were told they didn't belong and helps them rewrite that narrative. Each recipient would receive full tuition, housing, mentorship, and perhaps most critically, respect. During the launch event, Natalie stood before a room of young women, each handpicked for their tenacity, brilliance, and resilience. Some had come from shelters. Others were refugees. One had hacked into a university database at 15 not to steal, but to correct her falsely recorded failing grade. Natalie addressed them not like a CEO, but like a survivor of a quiet war. I was told to speak softly. I chose to build louder. You don't have to become smaller to make room for others. Take up space. Create it if it doesn't exist. She looked directly at a girl in the front row, no older than 17, who had spent most of the ceremony looking down at her shoes. And if anyone ever seats you at Table 42, remember, they just gave you the perfect view to flip the entire damn room. Laughter, cheers, a few tears. The world had changed, because Natalie had. Later that night, as the celebration wound down and guests filtered into ride shares and night trains, Aaron found her standing near the rooftop terrace. She was watching the lights of the city blink like distant signals. He walked up beside her, said nothing at first. Then I know you don't like surprises. I hate them, she replied. That's why I planned this 6 months in advance. Natalie turned, what? But he was already dropping to one knee. No fanfare, no hired photographer hiding in the bushes. Just him kneeling on concrete, holding a ring with a band shaped like the infinity symbol, subtle, purposeful. Aaron looked up. You don't need a partner. You never have. But if you want one, I'm here, not to complete you, just to stand beside you. Natalie stared at him. The last time she'd heard a proposal, it had been her mother begging her to marry before it was too late. This time, no one was rushing her. No one was demanding an answer. Aaron was simply offering presents. Natalie's heart thudded once. Then again, she didn't cry. She didn't laugh. She nodded. Yes, she said. Not because she had to, but because she chose it. The next morning, a newspaper headline caught her eye as she walked past a corner kiosk in Soho. The girl from table 42 just gave the world a seat. She bought the paper, folded it gently, slipped it into her bag, not as a trophy, but as proof. Proof that when you're written out of the story, you can still become the author of the next chapter. And if they don't save you a seat, you build your own table. And then you set enough chairs for everyone still waiting outside. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, tucked inside a plain cream envelope with no return address. Erin found it first, setting it on the counter beside Natalie's tea without a word. She noticed the handwriting immediately stiff upright, slightly shaky. Her mother's. Natalie hesitated before opening it, as though the paper might carry the weight of every unspoken year between them. She unfolded it slowly and began to read. Daughter, I used to think that being a mother meant knowing everything, but I was wrong. I didn't know how to raise a strong girl. I only knew how to teach a girl to be obedient, to be beautiful, to smile even when she was hurt. When you didn't do those things, I thought you were wrong. I thought you were stubborn, eccentric, and reckless. Only later did I understand you were just trying to be true to yourself. I'm sorry for making you feel small when you were trying to be great. I'm sorry for not sitting next to you when you should have been at the head of the table. If you still had room for me in your life, I would still be here. Mom. Natalie stood still for a long moment after reading, not crying, not trembling, just breathing, as if her lungs had only now remembered how to fill. 2 days later, she drove back to the house she once called home. It looked smaller than she remembered. The lawn was tidy, the mailbox freshly painted, but everything else felt as though time had folded in on itself. She didn't knock. The door was already ajar. Inside, the living room was exactly the same. The porcelain figurines, the heavy velvet curtains, the framed photo of Lily's high school graduation still prominent above the mantel. Natalie's footsteps were light but certain as she entered the kitchen. Her mother was sitting at the table, stirring a cup of tea she hadn't touched. They stared at each other. No music, no words. Just air thick with years of silence. Natalie broke it. I got your letter. Her mother nodded. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure I would either. The older woman's voice was raspy. You look strong. Natalie offered the ghost of a smile. You always said that like it was a flaw. Her mother looked down. It scared me. You scared me. Natalie tilted her head. Why? Because you didn't need me to approve of you, and I didn't know how to love that kind of daughter. There are words that don't need explanations, just air between them, just time. Natalie stepped forward. Not because she forgave, but because she could finally see the woman in front of her, not as a gatekeeper of pain, but as someone who had been taught to fear light that didn't come from her own window. She opened her arms. Her mother stood, and they embraced. It wasn't a perfect hug. It was stiff, hesitant, fragile. But it was real. And sometimes reality is a bigger miracle than reconciliation. They sat together in the kitchen for 26 minutes. Didn't talk about the wedding. Didn't talk about Nexus or the media or stock prices. They talked about Natalie's cat. About the summer Natalie spent hiding in the garage tinkering with old radios. About the night she'd watched the stars alone because no one remembered her birthday. And her mother said only one thing that mattered. I remember now. That night, as they walked to the front door, Natalie paused in the hallway. She looked at a framed photo of their family taken when she was 13. Everyone smiling, everyone facing forward, except her. She was turned slightly to the side, gaze distant, eyes sharp. A question she hadn't asked since childhood finally found voice. Did you ever wish I'd been someone else? Her mother didn't answer right away. Then, I used to. Natalie didn't flinch, but now her mother added. She stepped forward, adjusted the frame slightly on the wall. Now I wish I'd seen who you were sooner. Natalie blinked once. Thank you. As she stepped outside, the sun was beginning to dip below the tree line. Aaron stood leaning against the car, hands in his coat pockets, watching the sky. She walked to him. He didn't ask how it went. He simply opened the car door and waited for her to slide in. As they pulled away, Natalie glanced in the rearview mirror where the house grew smaller and smaller. Then Aaron spoke. Quiet, warm. You didn't ruin the wedding, Nat. She turned to him. You just made it honest. That night, as they lay in bed, her head on his shoulder, the quiet hum of the city outside, Natalie whispered something she'd never said before. I think I'm ready for what Aaron asked softly. To stop carrying every chair I was never invited to sit on. He smiled into the dark. Then let's build a whole damn table. She smiled, not out of triumph, but because she finally could. The spotlight shimmered on Natalie's black silk suit as she stood backstage at the Grand Pacific Forum in Singapore. Behind the heavy velvet curtain was a sea of 3,000 attendees, leaders, innovators, icons. And tonight she was one of them. The event host's voice echoed across the auditorium. Our next honoree is a woman who redefined what it means to build from the margins. From the wrong table to the global front lines of innovation, please welcome one of the 100 most influential women in technology, Natalie Legrand. Thunderous applause, cameras flashed. She walked onto the stage without rushing, her heels clicking with calm command. The kind of walk that says, I no longer need permission to be here. She stood at the podium, let the applause settle, then scanned the audience, a blend of awe and expectation staring back. Then with a voice smooth but unwavering, she began, "They say success is about the seat you're offered, but what if no one offers you one?" Pause, a breath. I was once seated at table 42. Not because I was late or uninvited, but because someone thought that was all I was worth. Eyes leaned forward, phone stopped recording, everyone listened. That table changed my life. Not because it broke me, but because it dared me to build one better. So I did. And if they don't invite you to the main table, build your own. Nail it from scratch, lay the cloth, set the silverware, then pull up a chair for every woman who's still waiting outside. She smiled, not the smile of revenge, but one carved from liberation. You don't need a seat to matter, you just need to know you do. Applause erupted again, longer, louder, a standing ovation. But Natalie didn't linger. She stepped down, walked through the spotlight, and disappeared into the wings, her message already etched in the bones of the room. 3 months later, a video went viral. It was posted by a 15-year-old girl from Morocco. Shaky camera, a small STEM classroom. The girl held up a sign that read, "I was going to drop out. Then I read about table 42. She flipped the page. "Now I'm learning to code." And another, "Someday I'll build something that saves someone's life." Cut to her instructor, another former recipient of the scholarship, now a teacher. The caption was simple. "This is what Natalie Legrand built. Haj, table 42, Haj, not invisible." It was shared across 60 countries within a week. A montage followed in the months ahead. The camera swept across a robotics lab in Nairobi, where a young woman barefoot beaming presented a prosthetic limb designed with open-source AI. Cut to Sao Paulo, a mother of 3 launching a medtech startup from her garage funded by a Table 42 microgrant. Then to a Brooklyn library where an evening class in genetic diagnostics was led by a once homeless scholar now lecturing on molecular pattern prediction. One thing connected them all. Not Natalie's name, but the belief she left behind. That being cast aside doesn't make you less. Sometimes it makes you unstoppable. At Nexus HQ, Aaron watched one of the videos silently from the conference room screen. He turned to Natalie, who was preparing a pitch deck for a new AI ethics committee. "You know this isn't normal, right?" he said, half smiling. Natalie didn't look up. "What? This you, changing the system that tried to erase you." She leaned back in her chair, considered that. "Then I didn't change the system." He frowned. "You didn't. I made it irrelevant." Then came the final scene. No trumpets, no ceremony. Just Natalie, older now, maybe just slightly, standing alone in her new Tokyo office, floor-to-ceiling windows wrapping around a skyline of neon precision. It was early evening. The city below was awash in 1,000 blinking stories. She adjusted the settings on a small desk lamp, straightened a stack of research papers, then walked toward the tall mirror near the back wall. She looked into it. No armor, no makeup team, no lighting crew. Just herself. And for the first time in her life, she saw someone who didn't need anyone else to see her in order to exist. A woman shaped not by who included her, but by who couldn't break her. She touched the mirror gently, whispered, "You didn't just survive. You outgrew every room that tried to shrink you." She smiled softly, and behind her, etched into the glass of her office door in discreet white font, were the words, "Natalie Legrand, Executive Director, Nexus Global, Founder, Table 42. The screen faded to black. Then, dedicated to every girl ever told, she was too much, too loud, too strange, too strong. You were never invisible. You were the foundation.